Okay. We are up to chapter 19 in Melakhim Bet, Kings 2, chapter 19. Just to remind ourselves, after the Pesach break, we had gotten to a very critical point in Jewish history. We had gotten to the point at which it's around 705 BCE. Assyria is the dominant superpower in the entire Middle East. Assyria has swept across the Middle East. 15 years before, it had exiled the 10 tribes. There's remnants of the 10 tribes left in the northern reaches of Eretz Israel. There are Jews who made it to Jerusalem, refugees, and there are Jews who made it even further to Egypt, probably. And for the last decades, in a sense, Judah has been a vassal of Assyria, first under Achaz. Achaz, the grandson of Uzziyahu, had basically requested help from Assyria and became a vassal to Assyria. And as we looked at, the Bible tells us that he brought in the cultural, religious, political influences of Assyria into the temple. And then we studied 2 weeks ago, about Hizkiyahu, his son, who was anti-Assyrian in his foreign policy, also in his belief, and his beliefs, probably through the mentors of those who were remnants from the time of Uzziyahu and Yotam, who raised him to be pro-God, so to speak, and reversed Achaz's entire agenda. And so we saw that in the book of Divrei Hayamim, we have a large, lengthy description about Chizkiyahu, about his righteousness, about his attempt to reverse the policies of his father, to cleanse out the Beit HaMikdash, get rid of the Bamot, which was a first. Up until this point, basically, even the best kings of Judah, the Bible still had the refrain, Rak HaBamot Lo Saru. That was the constant refrain. The Bamot, the personal altars, even if they were usually used for God, but they undermined the authority and the centrality of the temple in Jerusalem, they continued to be a source of problematic. We saw last week that Chizkiyahu got rid of them. And that was one element. He made the Pesach, the great Pesach, bringing the Jewish people together. We also saw that at some point he decides on a rebellion against Assyria, probably because of geopolitical realities that occur in the Assyrian kingdom. There are all kinds of rebellions going on in the Assyrian kingdom that we know from the annals of the Assyrian kings. We also know that the Egyptians want to make trouble, and also probably encouraged and offered support, as we'll see next week and the week after, offered support to whatever rebellions the cities of Ashkelon and Judea and all the various little vassals and city-states to challenge the hegemony of Assyria. And that's what we saw last week. And we ended, unfortunately, Assyria, when its own internal problems were solved, it decides to, once and for all, bring this to a conclusion. And so let me just bring up my Mechon Mamre, bring up my text. Okay. We'll go to the book of Kings 2, what we were up to. We did last week, chapter 18. So let me get this. So I'll claim the host. Let me just get the, again, sorry. Just a second. Make this small. Oh, Okay, do this and that. Okay, let's make this big again. Participants, claim host, put this here. Oh, yeah. Paste that. Okay, now I can share my screen with everybody. So let's make this bigger. Yeah. Okay, what happened to my Machon Mamre? Here it is. Okay. Okay. 1 second. Let's get rid of that. Yeah, screens. Okay. Let's see now. Should be able to share. Doo-doo-doo. We're on chapter 19 for those who have it. Gotta make this bigger. Okay, share. Okay. Okay, so now we have the share screen. So last week we did chapter, as I said, chapter 18, and the Bible described that though he was successful, B'Hasham Yisrael Batach, V'acharav lo yachamo, and etc. He was successful in battle. The Bible tells us, shana lemelech Chizkiyahu ala Sancheiriv melech Ashur al kol arei Yehuda. So in the 14th year of Chizkiyahu, he's an established king. He's cleansed the Beit HaMikdash. He's had the big revival, the religious revival of Pesach, all good things. At this point, Sancheiriv melech Ashur comes against him. As the Bible tells us, Vayimrod b'melech Ashur v'lo avado. At some point during this, between the 4th year and the 14th year, and at some point in these 10 years, he decides to rebel. And he comes against the Arei B'tsurot. Al kol Arei Yudot B'tsurot vayitfesem. He conquers all of the Arei HaB'tsurot. Vayishlach Chizkiyahu melech Yehuda melech Ashur lachisha limor chatati shuv mi'alei asher titein alai asa. He once again tries to make peace, vassalhood. Vayasem el chashol Chizkiyahu shlosh me'od kikar kesef, shloshim kikar kesef. He puts upon him a terrible tribute, and Chizkiyahu is able to do it for a while, but however, it's not successful because obviously either at some point he stopped paying the tribute or it wasn't enough, and there were continued to be murmurs of Chizkiyahu plotting against. And we had 2 weeks ago, we saw the attack on Chizkiyahu and on the Israelites. The representatives of Sancheiriv come and basically mock 2 speeches of the Rav Shakeh, 2 speeches. The first speech focuses on the word batach, as we mentioned last week. You are supposed to be the king who's relying on God, but who are you relying on here? God won't help you. Al mi batachta ki maradta bi. Atahine batachta l'chal misheneta al Mitzrayim. First of all, you seem to be relying on Mitzrayim. You can't rely on Mitzrayim. Second of all, you'll say you'll rely on God, but you've turned against God. Dafka, the thing that Chizkiyahu did, which was so positive in the eyes of the chronicler, the idea of getting rid of the Bamot, is twisted by the Rav Shakeh. And of course, this idea of who you're relying on, you can't rely on anybody, and certainly you can't rely on Chizkiyahu. Who are you relying on? So that's the first speech. We saw that last week, and again 2 weeks ago. And quickly, the second speech is the key word there was lahatzil. Don't be tempted by the words of Chizkiyahu. Don't trust what he says that God will save you. Did God save all these other cities? God, Ayeh Elohei Chamat, Arpad, Ki Hitzilu et Shomron. All these cities were also not saved, and therefore there's nothing to do. And so we ended 2 weeks ago with this tremendous blasphemy against the power of God to save and against the power of God to be salvific. and it ended with the representatives of the Judean kingdom coming back. Vayavo Yakimin ben Chilkiel shal habayit, v'shev nasofer v'yoch ben Asaf hamaskil, Chizkel kurei b'gadim, v'yigidu lo divrei Rav Shakeh. That's where we ended 2 weeks ago. We now continue, and the text tells us, Vayhi kishmo hamelech Chizkel v'yikrat b'gadav v'yitkas pasak v'yavo beit Hashem. So he continues. What they did, when they tell him, he also tears his clothing. However, he goes further than them. They tear their clothing, but he, vayitkas basak, which is, of course, so to speak, ole, as they say, madrega. He went another step further, that he actually covered himself in a sackcloth, which is a higher level of mourning. And certainly for the king to do that, it reminds us of Nineveh, where the king covered himself in sackcloth. So there's blasphemy, and there's also avelut. There's a sense of avelut. So not just blasphemy of kriyat b'gadav, but a sense of foreboding and of mourning. Vayavo beit Hashem, he comes to the temple. Vayishlach el Yakim asher habayit v'shem nasofer mitkasim basakim el Yeshayahu hanavi ben Amoz. He has them also wearing clothing. Vayimru elav ko amar Chizkiyahu. And this is what they tell Yeshayahu in the name of Chizkiyahu. So we have a speech. Again, everything in these chapters is divided by speeches, one speech, two speeches, one prayer, second prayer. It's a terrible day. It's a difficult day. So the metaphor that he uses is the children have come. There's a pregnant woman. But there's no more strength left to bring the baby out, to give birth to the baby. It's very interesting that mashber here, in modern Hebrew, mashber means a crisis, but in the context of the original meaning, it means the birthing stool. The children are about to come, but they're not coming. Why does he use the metaphor of the children? It seems to me that if we go back to the book of Isaiah, if you remember, one of the major things that we have in the book of Isaiah, when Isaiah appears to the kings, to Achaz and to Chizkiyahu, one of the major things that we have, and again, I can show you very quickly, is the use of the children of Yeshayahu and their names as symbolic of what is about to happen in the context of Israel. And so, for example, when Yeshayahu confronts Achaz for the first time, so Hashem tells him, Vayomar Hashem el Yeshayahu, Tseina likrat Achaz ata u'sha'ar yashuv b'necha. Sha'ar yashuv, your son. Sha'ar yashuv, of course, means that there's going to be a she'erit. That's one of the constant theological themes of the book of Isaiah, that whatever punishment happens to the land of Israel, whatever is going to happen to Yehudah, there'll always be a she'erit. The she'erit is a theme throughout the book of Isaiah. So his first son is named Sha'ar Yashuv. The she'erit will return and settle and be successful in this land. Later on, we're told about a second child. In the next chapter. In the next chapter, we're told about a second child whose name, I'm sorry, I think I missed one child. Later on, we're told about a second child who's born, who is explicitly seen as a sign, Sha'al lecha ot me'im Hashem, and he doesn't get an oat. And so he has a child. Lachen yiten Hashem ulachem ot. Hinei ha'alma harav yoledet ben. She's going to have a child. V'karat shemo Immanuel. God is with us. Emmanuel. Okay? And this, of course, once again, is a message of hope. That whatever happens, Immanuel, God is with us, even in the midst of all the suffering. In the next chapter in Isaiah, in chapter 8, which probably takes place later, we have a few years later maybe, we have a third child. Va'akrav al hanaviyah v'atar v'teled bein. V'emar Hashem Elai krav shemo maher shalal chashbaz. Quickly there will be spoils, chashbaz. Quickly there will be bizah, spoils. There's a doubling. And of course, we know that in the Bible, we have already known from the story of Joseph, whenever something is doubled, it's because God is going to do this soon, quickly. So it's a kind of double entendre here. It's going to be done, it's coming soon, and it's coming quickly. And the fact that it's doubled even highlights that it's going to come even more quickly. And here again, this child is related to the war that's coming. Maher shalal chashbaz. Soon there will be booty. Soon there will be bizah. Kivetermi dahanar, etc., etc. Yisad chel damesek v'chlal shamron lifnei melech Ashur. And finally, in chapter 9, we have the kind of the ultimate vision of the child who represents the ultimate redemption. And what's the name, right? What is that? In chapter 9, we have, which of course our good friends, the Christians, made a big deal about. All these names they made a big deal about, but Ki Yeled Yulad Lanu in chapter 9. Ha'am holchim b'choshech ra'u or gadol, they will see a great light. Again, this image of redemption. God will take off. Ki yeled yulad lanu bein nitan lanu. V'tehi am Yisrael shichmo v'yikra shmo pela yoetz el gibor aviad sar shalom. L'marbeh ham Yisrael l'shalom ein kates al kisei David v'amachlachto lachino to l'sada b'mishpat u'b'tzedakah mi'atzah b'olam. So you have this vision of this child who will have the name of God in him, Pela Yoetz, El Gibor, Aviad Sar Shalom, and he will sit on the Davidic throne without any interruption. And so in the Nevuot of Isaiah to Achaz and to probably Chizkiyahu directly, there was a tremendous use of the imagery of children. And I believe that's my personal thinking, I haven't seen it, that's part of why here Chizkiyahu uses also the image of children. But there is no, we don't have that last push to come out and be reborn and to emerge from. And here too, remember, it's very much the image of a siege. Jerusalem is surrounded, it's dark, and it's difficult and it's painful. Can you emerge from the siege? Are you able to emerge and once again be able to go out freely? And here too, we don't have that. And once again, Chizkiyahu asks Yeshayahu to raise up a prayer. So first of all, it's interesting. Chizkiyahu himself does not yet raise a prayer. He goes to the Beit Hashem, but he first asks Isaiah to raise a prayer. And again, it's very significant that that's what he asks Yeshayahu to do. Again, the first, and again, it's interesting, it's Ba'ad HaShe'erit, which of course is the term that Yeshayahu constantly used to describe that the remnant will be redeemed, the remnant will stay, Sha'ar Yashuv, that the remnant will always remain. And here too, that's what he's asking for. Also the fact that he says, go to Yeshayahu HaNavi. It's very interesting. It says he sends them El Yeshayahu HaNavi. The word Navi in biblical Hebrew in its original meaning does not mean a prophet the way we use today. Very often, many people think the word prophet means someone who has visions or can predict the future. Neither of those is the meaning of the word Navi. The first time the word Navi, in its original meaning, appears is in Breshit Perek 20, when Avimelech is smitten because of what he did, and God turns to him and says, okay, Va'ata hashev eshet ha'ish, return this woman to Abraham, ki navihu, He is a prophet, v'yitpalel be'adcha v'chyeh, and he will pray on your behalf. The Navi is someone who is a spokesman. He speaks. As many have noted, it comes from the root niv svatayim, the words of my lips, as it says in Tehillim, niv svatayim. That's why when I was a kid and I went to school, they would teach you nivim, which are pitkamim. They would teach you idioms. And in modern Hebrew, a niv was an idiom. So the Navi is a spokesman. He speaks to God, God speaks to him, and he passes that on to the people. Aaron is, God says to Moshe, he will be your prophet. What does it mean? Moshe has more direct prophecy than Aaron. It means he'll be your spokesman to Pharaoh. He's going to speak on your behalf. So here too, the request is that, so to speak, that Yeshayahu should play his role and pray to God. So Yeshayahu responds. Obviously, he prayed to God in the interim, or even before they got there. Don't worry about the Gidufim. He will die in his own land. He will not die here, but he will return to his land. Vayashav Rav Shakeh. Little play here on Vishav and Vayashav. Vayashav Rav Shakeh v'imtzat melech Ashur nilcham al livna. When Rav Shakeh came back from his encounter with the representatives of Chizkiyahu in the last chapter, it turns out that there were ups and downs. Vayashav Rav Shakeh v'imtzat melech Ashur nilcham al livna ki shama ki nasa miLachish. He had moved from Lachish. Lachish was the major battleground of one of the major fortress cities, and it was where that they established their base camp. And the reason he had come there was because there had been an incursion from Melech Cush. Again, this is probably part of the alliance with the Egyptian kings to try to help out. Vayishmalt el tir hakam Melech Cush lemor hinei yatzai lechem itach vayashav vayishlach malachim el Chizkiyahu. Now again, on one level, this tells you, this is a kind of, again, I've talked about it many times this year. It's a kind of the double level of what's going on. On one level, God is the one who's running the show. God is going to intervene. On the other hand, people are very concrete. Sometimes God works through the concrete actions of specific empires, etc. But here, at the same time that Chizkiyahu was turning to Yeshayahu, he was also doing real politik. He was making alliances with the Nubian kings and the Egyptians and tried to... So there's things going on. Maybe there were also factions amongst the government of Yeshayahu that were making feelers to the Egyptian kings. At the same time that Chizkiyahu is turning to Yeshayahu, there are others who are trying to bring in other powers that they don't know what, especially since the fact is that Chizkiyahu's been, Ashur has been very successful in the course of this campaign. They've swept across the Middle East. They've captured all these different cities, whether that year or in the course of many battles. And so there are many people who feel maybe God has abandoned us. Maybe the words of the Rav Shakeh are true. Maybe we shouldn't have gotten rid of the Bamot. There's all kinds of... So again, you have to read between the lines. There's different things going on. There's different factions going on, like there always is, just like today. There's so many different points of view. What should Israel do? What should Israel not do? In terms of its, strategy, here, this, that. Once again, after this battle with the Melech Cush, so Sancherev directly says to him, Kol tomrun al Chizkiyahu melech lemor, lemor. Notice here, there's, again, a little bit more of respect. Now it's a direct communication from Sancherev to the king, and he's called Chizkiyahu melech Yehuda. Maybe this setback with Melech Cush made him think twice. Who knows? And gave him a little bit more respect for the power or the fact that this wasn't going to be a cakewalk. Who knows? You know what's happened in the last few years, decades. Once again, the theme of Asher Ata Boteach Bo, you trust in God, but Va'ata Tinatzel, again, the two key words, bitachon and hatzala. Hahitzilu otam Elohei goyim asher shkatu avotai. Have these cities been saved? Gozan, which is the farthest east, that's one of the cities that the 10 tribes were exiled to, as it says. Haran is in the middle of Turkey. Retzef, Bnei Eden, Asher Batil Asar. Ayom Melech Hamat, which is in Syria, Melech Arpad, Melech La'ir, Ve'ikach. So all these cities on the way down from Assyria to Syria, Lebanon, Eretz Yisrael, we've swept away. Ayom Melech Hamas u'Melech Arpad u'Melech La'ir Sfarvaim. Vayikach Chizkiyahu et Asfarim b'yad Melakhim vayikra'ein. He read these. These were sent by diplomatic pouch. Vayal Beit Hashem vayifresehu Chizkiyahu lifnei Hashem. Here again, once again, this time he prays directly to God. The prayer through Yeshayahu is not enough, either because maybe he thought that the fulfillment of Yeshayahu's words would be the fact that Sancheriv had turned back to go fight in Livna, and he thought maybe that was the end of the war. But it turns out it wasn't the end of the war. That Sancheriv says, your turn is next. I'm going to finish with Tir Haka, and I'm going to come back and destroy you in Jerusalem. So at this point, Chizkiyahu himself turns to God. Vayipalel Chizkiyahu lifnei Hashem vayomer. Hashem Elohei Yisrael Yoshev HaKruvim. Ata olim levadcha l'chol mamlechot haaretz. Ata asita et hashamayim v'et haaretz. Very beautiful prayer. God who controls the world. Hatei Hashem, hatei oznacha u'shema. We say this in the Tachnun. Pekach einecha Hashem u're'ei shma divrei Sancheriv asher shlacho. Lacharef Elohim chai. He is blaspheming God. Omnam Hashem. It's true. Hecharivu malchei Ashur tagoyim et artzam. It's true what he says, that he was successful against all these kings in there. But you, God, they should know that you are God beyond anything of these gods. Here, of course, you already begin to have the echoes of the Yetziat Mitzrayim theme, that they should know v'yaidu kol mamlechot haaretz, which of course anyone who reads the Makot, as we did, or you read the Psukim about the Makot, knows that one of the constant refrains is Pharaoh did not know. He says, Mi Hashem asher shma b'kolo lo yadati. I don't know this God. He's not in one of the lists of approved gods. And constantly in the Makot, there's a threefold refrain. V'yadu ki ani Hashem. The first three Makot, they should know that I am God. The second three Makot, V'yadu ki ani Hashem b'kerev haaretz. They should know that I am God in the land, who is not a deist God who is removed from the world, just created the world and then left the world, but is involved in the world. And therefore, the key element in the second three Makot is the division, the hifleti, between what happens to the Israelites and what happens to the Mitzrim. And the final three Makot, plus Makat Bechorot, is V'yadu ki ein kamoni b'chol haaretz. Not only am I God God, and not only am I involved in the world directly, but I'm also God there's no other power like me. I'm not just one very important God in the pantheons of God, and I'm not just the biggest God, but there's no God like me. I'm beyond anything of your conception. And therefore, the last Makot are things that have never happened before. In the Arbe, it says, there has never been an Arbe like this before, and there'll never be an Arbe like this again. Makat Bechorot, there was a tzaka that no one had ever heard before. Again, this theme of beyond anything that you could imagine. And so this is already a hinting at the theme of Yetziat Mitzrayim that's going to happen with Chizkiyahu, hopefully. So in the context of, obviously, Yeshayahu had heard that the prayer of Chizkiyahu. Clearly, he had not been assuaged with the original statement and prayer and response of Yeshayahu because of what happened, that Sancheiriv sent a second message, clearly indicating that the war was not going to end quickly. And at that point, Yeshayahu sends a second message. Vayishlach Yeshayahu ben Amoz el Chizkiyahu limor komar Hashem lo Yisrael asher itpalalta elai el Sancheiriv melech Ashur shamati. God responds to the prayer of Chizkiyahu. Because the other Hashem diber Hashem elav. Bazal lecha lagal lecha betulat bat Zion acharecha rosh ani bat Yerushalayim. He's demeaned you. But God now, in effect, responds. God gets into the, right? Up until this point, God has not, so to speak, responded directly to the mocking. Here God responds, at miche rafta v'gidafta, v'al mihe ramauta kol, v'tisam aromenech al kedosh Yisrael. You have raised your eyes with haughtiness against the Holy of Israel, which is a term, again, that's for a shir in Yeshayahu, but the term Kedosh Yisrael appears in the book of Isaiah, especially, and in the mouth of Isaiah, like 40 times, more than any other prophet. The term, just like, it's kind of equivalent to the rabbinic creation of the name HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is not found in the Bible. The closest thing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Kedosh Yisrael, which is a term which is used by Yeshayahu more than any other prophet. Why? Good question for a shir for Yeshayahu. Biyad malachecha, chayrafta Adonai v'tomer berov rivchbi ani aliti mero marim. I've gone up Yarketei Levanon. Again, another theme that Yeshayahu constantly talks about is the haughtiness of man, and especially the haughtiness of leadership. If you remember chapter 1, chapter 2 of the book of Isaiah, which talks about all the Arzei HaLevanon and all these haughty images here too. You, Vatome Berov Richbi, because I have so much rechev, which again reminds us of Paro, who was full of the rechev, Susviro Chvo Ramavayam, and Ani Karti Vishatiti Maim Zarim, Vachri Bekaf Pe'amai Kol Yorei Matzor. I've destroyed all of these cities and all of these and all of the sieges. Hello, Shamata Lemirachok Ota Asiti. Have you not heard? I have created things from afar, from the very beginning of time, and etc., etc. I know everything that you've done. You're simply a tool in my hand. And God says, Yan hitragezcha elai v'shancha lai be'oznai v'samti chachi be'apech. I'm going to put my hooks in your mouth, in your nose. Umitki b'sfatecha v'ashivoticha b'derech asher bata. Like an animal, I'm going to bring you back to where you came. V'zelecha ha'ot. This is the sign. Achol hashana safiach. This year you're going to eat wild because they haven't had a chance to plant. Ubashana shenit sachish. Ubashana sheshit ziru. By the third year, you're going to be able to plant, etc. V'ichlu piryam. V'yasva pleitat beit Yehuda hanishara. The remnant that's left, v'asa, it will strike roots. Lamata v'asa pri lamala. Kim Yerushalayim teitzei she'erit. Again, the she'erit, she'ar yashuv, the remnant. Ufleita mehar Tzion, kinat Hashem tzvakot tasezot. The zealous God will do this. So again, this image of the she'erit, which remains and will emerge from Zion as and be protected. And therefore, he follows and he finishes. Lachein ko amar Hashem el melech Ashur. Lo yavo el ha'ir hazot. He will not come into the city. V'lo yoresh sham chetz. There will not be a battle. V'lo yikat mena magain. V'lo yishpoch aleha solila. Baderech asher yavo ba yashuv. He will go back. Again, one of the key words in this entire chapter is the word lashuv. Go back. Who's going to go back? Who's going back? From the very beginning, the term which is which is used to go back. Who's going to go back? Who's not going to go back? Here, he's the one who's going to go back. Vayasha vayishlach Melakhim el Chizkiyahu le'mor. He sends Malachim, but ultimately the king, is the one, the Sancheiriv. Baderech asher ba yavo bo yashuv el ha'ir hazot lo yavo ne'um Hashem v'ganoti al ha'ir hazot. I will protect this city. Lo shia lemani leman David avdi. Now, it is a fascinating thing, and again, the Bible then tells us the very famous resolution. Vayhi balayla hahu, vayetze malach Adonai vayach b'machanei Ashur. Very clearly echoing Yetziat Mitzrayim. It was on that night. We even have piyutim, balayla hahu. On that night. In fact, the Midrash says it was Pesach night. Of course, it's Pesach night because there's a great destruction of the army. Vayetze malach Hashem. We have the image of the Malach HaMaves. Vayach b'machanei Ashar. 185,000. Vayashkimu baboker v'hinei chulam pkarim meitim. They're all dead. Now, we don't have explicit contemporary evidence for this from extra-biblical sources. We have Herodotus, very famously, one of the Greek and Roman historians, talks about a tradition that there was a battle in which the Assyrians were fighting the Egyptians, and they and mice came and ate all of their bows and arrows and weapons, and they were destroyed. Josephus records a tradition that they died of a plague, dever, plague, which would be very cute because mice carry often the bubonic plague. It's also cute because, of course, plague reminds us of dever v'timrot ashan. So there's certainly this image here of it happening, and it's like God himself with the malach, with the mashchit coming and destroying them. In the 70s and 80s, people, when they started to read the prism of Sancheiriv more carefully, they noted, and so let's try to find again the prism of Sancheiriv, that in it too, and this has been developed by in many articles by a Israeli scholar, Chaim Tadmor. Let's see if we can find it, the actual text of the text, which we showed last week, the text of Sancheiriv's annals. Let's see if we can, yeah, this is what it looks like, but let's see, yeah. So, let's see if we can find the whole, this is not a good one. Let's see the text. Well, let's see from here, right, this is what the prism looks like. Let's see if we can get the actual text. Text. Yeah. So, and if you look in many of the battles that are described in the annals of Sancheiriv, Sancherib, the great king, the mighty king, the king of the world, etc., etc., you have a kind of pattern, which is that when he captures a city, he captures the city, he kills the king, etc., etc. Okay, and he burns the city down. So let's take a look. I don't know, column 2. Yep. In my third campaign, I went against the Hittite land. Yeah, there he died, etc. And he appointed a new king. Okay. I tore away and brought to Assyria, etc., etc. And then, let's see, the next one. Yeah. So then when he describes the conquest of Chizkiyahu, as for Chizkiyahu the Judite, who did not submit to Yayok, 46 of his strong-walled cities, that's what it says in Tanakh, the Arim HaBetzurot, as well as the small towns, which were without number, by leveling with battering rams, and by bringing up siege engines, by attacking, by mines, I besieged them and took them. So it's very clear. It says, I besieged them and I took them. I captured all of those cities, as it said in Tanakh. 200,000 people. Again, does that include all of the campaigns from the very beginning of the the campaigns from the very beginning of attacking Judea and Israel? Who knows? But then it says, Chizkiyahu himself, like a caged bird, I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city. I threw up earthworks against him, earthworks, the one coming out of the city gate. I turned back to his misery. His cities, which I had despoiled, I cut from his land. To Mitini, king Ashdod, etc., I gave them. As for Chizkiyahu, the terrifying splendor of my majesty overcame him, etc. And the Arabs and his mercenary, which had brought into Sudan, deserted him, etc. In addition to the 30 talents of gold, etc., etc., as well as his daughters, his meat, who had brought after him meat to Nineveh to pay tribute, he dispatched his messengers. So many scholars have noted that in contrast to all of the other places which he captures, he kills the leadership. Like, for example, right before that, I approached Ekron, slew the governors and nobles who had rebelled, and hung their bodies on stakes. The inhabitants who rebelled and treated lightly, I counted as spoil. The rest of them who were not guilty of rebellion, I declared their pardon. Padi, their king, I brought out to Jerusalem, sent him on a roll thrown over them, and imposed them royal tribute. But the kings who had rebelled, he captured, he killed. When it comes to Jerusalem, he has this very strange formulation. I brought them away and counted as spoil. Chizkiyahu himself, like a caged bird, I shut him up in Jerusalem like his royal city. So what does that mean? Did he capture Jerusalem? Did he not capture Jerusalem? There's no mention. And many scholars note that that is very significant because it seems to point to the fact that Jerusalem, from the external biblical evidence, was never captured by Sancherib. And there may have been a siege in which he treated like a caged bird. Now, I just want to point out, and so there is extra biblical evidence. Number of scholars have pointed to the fact that, yeah, it certainly doesn't seem like he captured Jerusalem. He did not kill Chizkiyahu, even though he rebelled against him. And so that's very, very strange. And so this certainly supports the biblical evidence. In addition, Rav Yol bin Nun points out something very, very interesting. If one looks in the book of Yeshayahu, and again, Yeshayahu is not in chronological order, so the fact that so in chapter 30, which describes those who turn to Egypt for help, etc. And talks about not relying on Egypt. So let me see. Is that in chapter? 1 second. Second, just find the reference. So in the book of Yeshayahu, yeah. Yeah. So in the book of Yeshayahu, describes a salvation. Hashem bami merchak boer apo, etc. Hashir Yelachem Kilel Hitkadesh Chag, which Chazal associate with Pesach, of course, interestingly enough. But in the very next chapter, you have a very interesting formulation. It says as follows: Kikomar Shem Elai Kasher Yegeh Ha'aryeh V'Akfir Al Talfor Sheyikalei Olam Lo Roim Mikolam Lo Yechet Yered Hashem Tzvakot Litzbo Al Har Tzion V'Al Givata Kitziparim Afot, like birds that are able to fly freely. Kain Yagain Hashem Tzvakot, God will protect you. Al Yushalayim. Ganon, protection. Vihitzil, that key word. Pasoach, he will pass over Vihimlit and allow you to escape. It's a fascinating pasuk. And this pasuk seems to point to this idea that possibly playing off of the annals of Sancheriv, the idea that, somehow that he thought that he had, caged up Jerusalem and Yishai and Chizkiyahu like a caged bird, not able to go anywhere, etc. And Yeshayahu promised that God, here directly to Sancheriv, that he would protect Jerusalem, that he would, as he says, Kim Yerushalayim teitzei sherit ufleita mihar Tzion, lachen komar Hashem lo yavo la'ir azot, v'lo yoreh sham chetz, v'lo yikadmenu magen, v'lo yishpoch l'esav, b'derech asher yavo b'yashuv la'ir azot lo yavo, v'ganoti la'ir azot. I will protect the city l'hoshia l'mani l'man David avdi. Ganon ufasoach, protection and skipping over, God will skip over. In this, it's a play. It's a skip in the sense of like a kippah, like a kippat barsel, like a protection. God will skip over you. So I think that's an interesting point that has echoes here. Finally, the text ends with this text, which almost everyone agrees, both modern Jewish traditional scholars and secular scholars. This is put here at the end, but it didn't really happen right away. Sancheriv did not die right after this story. Many years later, he died and we have records that he was killed by his children. So but it happened later on. But the Bible wants to finish the story of Sancheriv and kind of show, he got what he, hoped for. And the kind of, Hinei chulam pkarim meitim, they were all dead, the troops. In the end, Sancheriv himself died. Vayisa vayelech vayashav Sancheriv melech Ashur vayeshev b'Ninveh. He returned and he went to Ninveh, the king of Assyria, and the capital. Vayihu mishtachaveh beit nisroch Elohav va'adar melech v'sharetzer banav hiku b'cherev. They killed him. V'heiman nimlatu eretz Ararat. It's almost a kind of reverse makat bechorot. Here, it's not the children dying; it's the children killing the father. Kind of a so it's a kind of, I think there's a kind of little irony here, also playing with the Pesach story, that his children end up killing him. Vayimloch Eisar Chadon beno tachtav. Somebody had a comment: can Pesach here be rendered guard or protect? Yes. Could certainly be rendered. That's one way to read it here, as again a term of fasoach, either to be protection or also to show mercy. Sometimes the Targum Onkelos translates it as chas or chemla. So it could be also pischa here in the pasoach means to protect, to show mercy, to show love and concern. Okay, Mirz Hashem, next week we will continue. Let me get rid of stop the share. Next week, we will continue, and we will, again, our goal is, in Mirz Hashem, we're still on our goal. Our goal is to finish the book of Kings 2 before Shavuot. That'll be the week before Shavuot, will be our last shiur. So I think we have 5 weeks. We have 5 weeks, and we have 6 prakim, right? We have 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So somewhere in those 5 weeks, we're going to have to somehow do, or maybe 2 weeks, we'll do a parak and a half, and we'll make sure that we cover as much ground. And maybe at the end, we might go till 10:30 one night just to make sure that we finish what we need to finish before Matan Torah. Everyone should have a wonderful week. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
I hope you're enjoy your first chametzes of the week today or tomorrow, whatever.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.